Okay. I think people will still be joining, but I think it's probably time to make a start today. So hello everyone, welcome, and thank you for joining us on this webinar this afternoon or morning, depending where you are in the world. So this is the 11th webinar in the Data-Centric AI series, and in this edition, we'll be discussing the crucially important topic of open data and AI. Before we start, I'm Joe Massey, a senior researcher here at the ODI. I've done lots of work here thinking about how organizations can steward data for the benefit of the public and thinking about how people can be more involved in the data ecosystem. I'm going to be the panel chair for today. I'm going to introduce the rest of the fantastic panel in just a minute, but first, a little bit of housekeeping and a little bit of scene setting. So this webinar is being recorded and shared via social media, as well as our email newsletter. And it's going to be archived on the ODI website as well as on YouTube. We might use some quotes and extracts from the recording of this in future ODI communications, just so you're aware. And we strongly encourage you to submit your own questions to the panel discussion. It's already been really lively in the chat, and we love to see that. So please keep the discussion and the questions coming in the chat functionality on this webinar. Our team is in the chat and we'll be sharing links and everything to support you. So please do get in touch if there's any issues there. So this is the 11th webinar in the Data-Centric AI series, a program where we share our work from the ODI and invite experts from all around the world to share their research, key insights, and recommendations for building the socio-technical data infrastructure needed to make AI work for all of us. You can find recordings for each of our previous webinars with experts from technology companies, academia, and the public sector on our YouTube channel, and today's recording will be made available there as well in a couple of weeks' time. My colleague has just shared the link to some of those webinars in the chat if you wanted to catch up with those at a later date. So back to the topic of today. Data is a critical part. We know now data is a critical part of tackling some of the biggest challenges we face as society and has been a foundation to many of the important technological innovations of recent years. New technology like generative AI rely upon data to function. And as is a well-known statement we like to use here at the ODI, without data, there would be no AI. In this environment, the readiness of data to be used for AI is becoming a hot topic. Lots of thinking that's out there on AI readiness is quite high level and is not always easy to understand. And you actually need what one actually needs to do as a data publisher to make data AI ready. And so over the past year at the ODI, we've been thinking about what this means in practice. And next one, Thomas, please. So we've designed a framework to define the distinct aspects of what makes data ready to be used for AI. We've designed a living, validated, and updated framework so that we can use in many different contexts. In the process of applying this framework in two projects, we've updated the framework to include an additional dimension to explore the specific criteria for data holders to follow, offering actionable recommendations for dataset properties, including standards compliance, de-identification, and appropriate file formats, metadata, which includes things like machine-readable metadata formats, supply chain information, and clarity around legal things such as licenses. The surrounding infrastructure, which includes things like accessible portals, APIs, and version control. And then, of course, the governance, which includes things like governance policy as code, documented roles and responsibilities, and clear data access processes. In this webinar, we want to talk about open data and how important open data is for AI, as well as thinking a little bit about whether open data is ready to be used for AI. Now, as the name suggests, at the ODI, we're pretty passionate about open data. Open data underpins many of AI's biggest advances. Systems like AlphaFold are built on decades of openly shared protein structures, while biodiversity monitoring models depend on citizen science datasets like iNaturalist. Among others, chatbots are using open knowledge from Wikipedia, and Common Voice enables large language models to be trained on under-resourced languages from around the world. Open data goes some way to democratizing AI by providing smaller organizations and initiatives with a wealth of data to work with, and it increases transparency and accountability for those building new technology. So open data is a pretty big part of the AI story, but is all open data AI ready? In the early days of open data, there was a boom in publishing open data openly without always thinking too much about who might use it, what they might want to use it for, and how they might want to access it. And just as it was during those early days of open data, simply making open data sets available online is not enough for them to be used to support AI development. We know that open data is not always published with a specific use case in mind, and so it's likely that many of those data sets published before the advent of ChatGPT in 2022 are understandably unlikely to have considered what it means for that data set to be AI ready. To get a flavor of some of the challenges facing open data in the AI era, we analyzed 10 open data sets from the ODI's Open Data Use Case Observatory, which we developed in partnership with Microsoft. These data sets span different domains, data types, and institutional contexts from all over the world. And we found that open data sets face a series of issues in being ready for AI use. We found there's an API divide amongst data sets covered in the project, where some data sets were not accessible via the API, limiting their usability in the AI landscape. When developing AI systems, having readable metadata to discover and index datasets can be important for understanding the data, but for the open datasets we looked at, that was often missing. And then for a further, and there was various other things that might have been missing as well. So uncertainty data, which helps AI systems to understand the nuances of data sets and helps to understand the bias that data can create in an AI model. That's also tended to be missing in what we saw. And then without formal version control, reproducing model training becomes nearly impossible, and research built on specific data snapshots cannot be validated. Finally, governance documents are rarely found in machine readable formats and often shared as PDF policies, which are difficult for machines to parse in the current moment. So open data has some way to go to becoming AI ready. But what does AI readiness look like for those working with open data on the ground? How is AI changing the way we think about publishing open data? And what does the future hold for the relationship between open data and AI? Luckily for us, we've got a fantastic panel together today to help us answer some of those questions. So for now, I'm going to introduce us to our panelists, and then we're going to dive straight into the questions. So we've got today Gretchen Dio, Director of IP Policy, Outreach, Open Innovation in the Intellectual Property Group at Microsoft, Andrew Myers, Lead Architect at Northumbrian Water Group, and Professor Eleanor Simpel, Director of Research at the ODI and Professor of Computer Science at King's College London. So to start off with, we want to talk a little bit about how you all see the landscape of open data and AI. And so maybe we could start off with Gretchen to introduce yourself a little bit, tell us about your work, and tell us how you see the current landscape of open data and AI.
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's really nice to be part of this panel today. So, as Joe mentioned, I'm Gretchen Dio. I'm on our Open Innovation team at Microsoft. I'm based in Redmond, Washington. And I lead our open data work, which includes partnerships with knowledge institutions, research organizations, as we partner together to explore what more open and accessible data looks like. And we also look at the models for making data more accessible. So more recently, that's been really exploring Open Data Commons as a model. And our most recent work, I would say, has been in Europe, where we've been supporting European institutions to make digital content on language data and cultural data more accessible. So that's sort of like a high-level snapshot of the work that I lead. And when it comes to the landscape, I would say just at a high level, I think often the conversation is centered on AI infrastructure and talent, but often missing from the conversation really is data. And progress in all three of those pillars will be critical for AI development and leadership, but I think it's really data and access to data that will be quite fundamental. So it is often missing from the conversation, and I think that's something that it's nice to have conversations like this to really bring it more to the fore. I would say that we do see a bit more barriers being put up around data accessibility. And I think that looks different depending on the data itself. There could be a number of reasons. I think there have been instances where we've seen open data privatized or commoditized. There's examples of climate data this happening too in that space. Um, Existing AI data sets may be diminished due to restrictions that are put on that data. So it's really a number of ways and reasons we can see these barriers come up. There's also a tremendous amount of data that's not accessible at all. It's just not digitized or it's still stuck in data silos. So that continues to be just a barrier to data accessibility. But we do know that for a really beneficial, well-performing AI needs access to both vast and varied data sets are really important both for the AI developer and for the user for a good experience and working with AI. Um, and I would say at the same time as those barriers, at least I've also been talking to some governments and other organizations that are holders of really high quality data and would like to see it better represented in AI. So they may not be seeing their data reflected in AI. And that's where we've spent a lot of time thinking about the framework for what AI ready data looks like so that it can be better reflected. So the the framework that we've really focused on is looking at the three primary challenges of data discoverability, accessibility, and usability. So discoverability just, is the data easy to identify or find? Um, Data accessibility would be like, is it machine readable? And then usability would be, is it labeled, cleaned, formatted, really actionable? So that's the a broad working framework for how we've been thinking about it. And then I would say the other interesting thing in the AI era is today, artificial intelligence really benefits from access to unstructured data sets as well. Because I think in previous waves, we've been a little more focused on structured or tabular data. But for example, long form text, images, video, audio, all of those elements are really important to AI today. But still, often those do do benefit from having some curation and more detail applied to them so that they can be more usable. And so that's really where more just best practices, you know, good data dissemination practices can be really useful. And we've at Microsoft have published a technical guide that was really intended for governments, but could be used by any organization to support looking at those three challenge areas of discoverability, accessibility, usability, and how to think about prioritizing um, data. If you have a lot of data, how to think about prioritization, making that available and as usable as possible. So that's, I would say, just high level. That's kind of where we've been, some of the work we've done, and a look at the open data landscape, both on some barriers that we can see, but also organizations that are exploring how to make their data more AI ready so that it can be reflected in AI. Yeah, it's a
Brilliant.
high level
Brilliant.
view.
Yeah, no, that's great. And if you were able to share any of those resources like the framework in the chat, I'm sure many
Absolutely.
people would be thrilled to see that. So you talked about best practice, and I think people are always really interested to hear from people who are working on the ground to publish data openly and who are beginning to think about what that means to maybe alter what changes need to be made to make that data AI ready. So we're really pleased to have Andrew Myers join us today, who's working right on the kind of forefront of publishing open data in the water sector. So Andrew, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your work and how you're thinking about open data and AI.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So I guess the UK water sector is probably relatively new to really pursuing open data at a sector level and really sort of pushing forward with that. So I'm co-lead of the Stream initiative, which is a project that's brought the majority of the UK water sector together to work collaboratively on this. So trying to make sure that we're publishing with purpose, that we're publishing together to a standard schema, that we're trying to follow best practice and have brilliant support from the ODI throughout that, in terms of how best to approach the publication of data to make sure we get the most value from that. We started work in 2020, and then we've been releasing data since 2023 on a pretty regular basis with an enduring platform in place. So we're seeing a lot of benefit from the data sets that we've already got released. Predominantly trying to make sure it's machine readable, it's in a consistent format, so every water company that publishes it uses the same format, uses the same metadata, and it's available at a national scale. So those data sets can easily be joined, even though we're not joining them for people. We're not trying to be a consolidator or an aggregator. But what we're trying to do is make sure everyone publishes them in the same way, on the same open license, in the same format, so that you can start to look at things at a national level. And we've seen some really good benefits from that. I guess starting to look at what AI means for that, I guess, has happened probably a lot this year. I would say it's really sort of become real for us in this year, as we're starting to see a lot more potential use cases for AI and a lot more where people are keen to use it. Some of the stuff that we're doing anyway and following best practice for open data locally is also best practice for making data work well with AI, in terms of enforcing the metadata structures, making data machine readable and API accessible. But then there's other things that maybe we hadn't considered too much earlier that we're now starting to think about more of. If you want this data to be useful via a more sort of chat interface, like an answer engine, rather than someone querying to go, can I find a link to this data, which is kind of how people have traditionally approached open data, to now thinking, actually, I want to know the answer to a question. Our data holds some really good information that might give someone directly availability to the answers, but we need to make sure that we've got appropriate column headers, we've got appropriate tags, we've got things in natural language that people would normally understand, rather than setting it up assuming it's going to be a data expert that's going to be loading this and doing various different manipulations with it. So we're starting to think about what it means for us. We're quite early days in terms of making the data sets that we've already got published AI ready, but thankfully it looks like a lot of the principles we've been following so far have got us part of the way down that journey.
Brilliant. Yeah, and we'll come back to the point you made earlier around the change in thinking of how kind of AI has altered how people are thinking about publishing and sharing open data. But last but not least, Eleanor, you've had plenty of experience working with open data initiatives and open data communities in your work and your research. So please take a second to introduce yourself and your work and tell us what you see as the landscape for open data.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Very happy to be here. It's a hell of a topic. So, as Joe was saying, I have been doing some work in this space. It was mostly with open government data and open scientific data sets as well, because I am a scientist. And lots of the work I've been doing was in terms of building that technical infrastructure, discoverability, accessibility, usability, as it was said before, both from a technical computational point of view, but also from a human data interaction point of view, and the opportunities we see now with natural language interfaces, especially with respect to that last aspect, are very, very exciting. So the question was, how do you see the landscape of open data for AI, and is open data usually AI ready? So I'd like to unpack this a little bit and to say that, as Joe and others have mentioned, there has been a lot of investment, including public taxpayers' money, but also private investment, and third sector resources that have led to a rich open data landscape across domains. And by open data, I mean data that is openly licensed, so published in a way that does not raise any restrictions with respect to reuse. Now, when you publish data for general purpose use, you do it in a slightly different way than when you publish it with a specific use case in mind. And there is always, from a technical point of view, a bit of a balance between trying to support as many data consumers and use cases as possible versus really optimizing for a particular use case. And AI, and we're talking machine learning and generative AI here, are one of these classes of new emerging technical use cases that raise some questions and some requirements about what types of technical formats do they expect, what set of consumption patterns are they used to work with, that existing open data publishers could and should take into account, because the beautiful thing about open data, whether in government and science in any area, is that possibilities are endless. The challenge is that you don't actually know who's using your data. And the number of times, and I don't know, Andrew, how you feel about this, but there's lots of data publishers in this space, times and times again, say, "Oh, we love to hear about how our data is used." And sometimes they do, and it's sort of like, "Oh, this value is missing. Could you fix it?" But sometimes, there's these great stories about what that open data can unpack and unlock, and that's absolutely amazing. But what that also means is that without this information, without this feedback loop about what matters about potential users, potential impact, as well as actual users and tangible impact, it's sometimes hard to make a case for upgrading that infrastructure, for making sure that the technical formats and tools remain up to date. So that AI readiness is really an attempt, at least in my experience, working with various, let's just say, traditional open data holders, is really comes from a wish to make this data remain relevant and reduce some of those frictions of use. On the other hand, I think we should not kid ourselves. There's a lot of data that is still missing. And especially if we're thinking about public interest AI and use cases where actually having those open data commons would be absolutely invaluable. And we at the ODI have been watching the Open Data Commons project that Gretchen was talking about very, very closely. And there's a number of other examples from Mozilla and other places in the community that have realized that this is still needed. So we still need to create open data resources to serve certain AI use cases. And those data sets, of course, will be, by virtue of when and how they've been created, more AI ready than, say, a data set that has been published for the first time 15 years ago. So that gives us this rich collection of best practices potentially about and techniques that hopefully many other data publishers will adopt to reduce some of those frictions and make the data both AI accessible and AI usable. But finally, and I promise I will end on a positive note for the other answers. So there's a worry that I personally have and others in the ecosystem have around that existing decades long open data ecosystem we have collectively created. And that is that in the last years, we've seen that ecosystem under threat. Resources like Wikipedia and many other open data sets, open data commons, have been absolutely essential to create the AI capabilities we all enjoy as companions or in other ways. But at the same time, the current AI race has led to a range of behaviors in terms of how these open data commons and their infrastructure, which is not free to run, has been put to strain. And this needs to stop, because those projects, those commons projects, whose sustainability has always been, not problematic, but quite challenging, are now spending more and more of their time and resources in trying to keep that infrastructure up and running because of the amount of traffic and crawling they've been hit with. So whatever ideas we here have to stop that from happening, and I think it would mean that we would have a healthier ecosystem that would lead to more AI applications and systems that could be used for the benefit of everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. An impassioned call for the future of open data there. Just to the audience, please keep your questions coming in the chat. We're going to get onto those in a little while. Please feel free to ask our guests anything you might want to know. Thinking about kind of building on Eleanor's last point there, and Gretchen, your experience working with data commons, it'd be great to hear a little bit more about what you think the role of these institutions and initiatives are in enabling open data to thrive in this era of uncertainty, I suppose, around publishing data. What is it about these data commons which are going some way maybe to turning the tide on the dangers that Eleanor just spoke about?
Yeah, thank you. It is not, it's a really important point because it's not just the data, it's the infrastructure by which that data is made available, which is how we can think about the commons. It's the infrastructure by which it's made available. And when it comes to especially providing high quality curated data sets, the data commons can really enable that with community input and enable more shared value. So at a high level, they're really thought of as a collaboratively governed public interest ecosystem, data ecosystem that curates, validates, and provides more context-specific data sets. And I'll give a couple examples. And Elena mentioned some of the work we've been doing. We've done some work with the GovLab, Action Research Center, really exploring these. And most recently, we did a data challenge where we were looking for proposals on specifically open data commons. So organizations that are stewarding open data commons. And I'll describe the two ORDs and then the elements that they have in common. So the really interesting projects. One is based in Brazil by an organization that runs it called Surdi Amazonia. And they're developing an Amazon Evolution Rainforest Index. So it's really taking these disparate open data sets and bringing them together in much more real-time fashion, and then making them more accessible for people to go through and understand, so through visualizations and dashboards and that kind of thing. So really making it more user-friendly for people to make decisions off of when it comes to land use and other local aspects that people may be exploring. So that was a really interesting project that's making this data more accessible, real time, and bringing it together in a more consumable way. Another project, the other awardee is a project in Malawi that's being led by the NYU Peace Research Program. They're working in collaboration with an organization called Ushahidi in Malawi, the UNDP, and Mozilla Common Voice. And that's a great example of that multi-stakeholder approach where they're really bringing in the community input and the community governance aspect. So this particular project, basically they have this initiative where, for example, a farmer who's on the ground in Malawi sees rising floodwaters. That farmer can just call a number and in their local language report what they're seeing. And then through the technology that's enabled, that can be translated and sent to the relief agencies that can support that concern. So it's a really, and again, this data is also being made more accessible via a data commons through the work that they're doing. So just two really interesting examples of what we're seeing in this space. And I would say that they're all centered around enabling more high quality data for AI analysis. And then I think the fundamentals that they have in common is one, community stewardship. So community governed and decided, that community deciding the governance, equitable access, which again is for the community to determine what that looks like. Data quality standards, but the data commons do tend to be more higher quality, curated data sets. That's a feature of them. And then I would say the fourth one that Elena mentioned is a sustainable operating model. So these have a cost tied to them. So some organizations are really looking at interesting ways to make them available, whether that's through memberships supported or grant supported, a variety of ways that essentially a sustainable operating model is being explored to make sure that they're sustained over time, so they don't become sort of a data commons that goes by the wayside, which can be done if it's not really has a sustainable operating model. So those are the four aspects that we've been exploring in terms of what makes for a data commons that can be really beneficial and unlock value by making this type of infrastructure, establishing it and establishing the commons. So I would say at a high level, that's just what we're seeing from when it comes to governance and how we've been supporting some of these institutions in this space, for example, through this challenge and other ways that we're exploring.
Absolutely. And I think that element of collaboration and kind of bringing that together data from different places is really interesting task that can really help to bring out some more of that data that Elena mentioned before that's still missing and still part of that puzzle. And Andrew, I think the work of Stream to bring together a number of private companies together to share data collaboratively in an open way is a real achievement. And so I'm really curious to hear more about how the role of the kind of institution of Stream has enabled that data to be brought together in a central place, and how that enables more data again, and how you're thinking about working together to tackle this idea of AI readiness.
So yeah, I guess on the data institution part, that's a real key hot topic for us at the moment within Stream. The Stream started as a pretty loose collaboration of companies deciding it was better to work together than work individually. It's then been formalized into an innovation project, but it's still a collaborative project rather than set up in a way to be an enduring data institution. And that is something that we're actively working on as we speak to see what the structure of that looks like. How do we make sure that we are set up in the right way, that we will be sustainable for the future, that we are able to continue doing the right things that we need to be doing, continue to drive value for the member companies, but also along with our mission, delivering value for customers, society, and the environment. So we're trying to make sure that we can tie all of that together and be stable in the right way going forward. And I guess part of the thinking around the impact of AI might have on those different operating models comes down to getting value from the data that we're publishing. We don't want to publish data to tick a box and go, okay, the regulator said we should do open data. We've done open data. There we go, job done. We have a value framework that we look at to make sure that we're doing this for the right reasons. We're doing it in the right way, and we're doing it, so that we understand it can drive some wider value and some wider benefits. And some of that is accountability and transparency come into that. So, if our customers want to interact with data and want to understand how companies are performing, how companies compare with each other. They should be able to do that in a way that is easy and digestible for them using the tools that they choose and the tools that they're familiar with. They shouldn't need a data science degree to be able to find out information about their water supply company. So we want to make sure that we're publishing data in such a way that it enables people and kind of lowers that barrier for entry for people that are interested in looking at that data and really interrogating and understanding what companies are performing. And that could be general performance of the company. So we've done a lot of work to make sure our annual performance reports are in a machine readable format and in a consistent way, rather than the sort of some of the worst spreadsheets you've seen in your life with thousands of cells across hundreds of tabs. So finding the value, even when you know the spreadsheet really well, can take a long time. To getting that into a machine readable format has really helped, because then all of the water companies now go and use the machine readable one, download it and work with it and compare themselves with every other water company. So even within companies, it's saved a ton of time. But as a byproduct, that makes it much easier for various different AI tools to connect to that data and ask natural language questions of that data and get back a response. So we're seeing kind of following those best practices is helping us to make data more readily available for AI and those different routes in. And I think we need to continue to look at use cases with that lens of what's the value we're trying to get, who's trying to get the value, and how can we maximize the accessibility and remove as many barriers as we can for people to use data in a good way.
Absolutely. And that's teed me up nicely for my next question to Eleanor, is around how you see that kind of this development of AI and large language models in particular changing the way that people are thinking about publishing and using open data. What new opportunities do these models enable for people at the data use stage, but also throughout the data lifecycle?
Yeah. So just very briefly about the first thing. So I think because of the behaviors that I was referring to earlier and that have also been discussed in the chat, we have actually gone back. There's also some very interesting research coming out of MIT and Hugging Face at NeurIPS, which is a big AI conference that is happening this week in San Diego, that has looked at the open AI ecosystem that includes open data, based on a large analysis of billions of activities and models and data sets shared on Hugging Faces. So I would also refer to that. But the fact is, because people starting to think about their data, I'm talking about people, not as individuals and my personal data, just the data holders are rethinking the value of their data. Because of this, to some degree, predatory and extractive behavior we have seen from some organizations, not from all, but from some organizations. The level of accessibility of data has gone down. Yeah, so another paper of MIT from last year showed that it analyzed all the robot.txt changes in the common crawl or curated versions of it, so on the big public data set that everyone's been using to train models. And within a year, they've seen a change of 30% with much more restrictive terms of use that data holders have. So there's something that is happening, at least in the way how people perceive the value of their data and how they think it's fair for their data to be used by others, which means we potentially have less rather than more open data. But then at the same time, if we're thinking just how painful data publishing can be, there's and how cumbersome the methods we have come up with to work with data in the last 20 to 30 years. This is the fact that we have these capabilities is super exciting. I mean, some of the work I've been doing and in my lab at King's is perhaps not very glamorous, but we've been looking at the never-ending story of the quality of the metadata in data sets. And we're able to show that actually with small language models that you can run on a decent laptop, you can actually do a lot of work to improve that metadata, which means not only that you would have a better search, sort of traditional search and other opportunities, but you would also be able to implement some of those agentic AI capabilities or some of those natural language interfaces that were mentioned before. So I think in terms of data work for the data publisher, there's amazing opportunities that these foundational capabilities that we now have, including small models. Not everything has to be done with an expensive model that you access via an API. Small models that are run in-house are very, very performant. Open source, open weight models are getting very, very good at certain tasks. So it's a game changer as far as I'm concerned.
Excellent. Exciting the times ahead. So we have had quite a lot of good questions in the chat. So we had one last question we wanted to ask to the panel about how they see what they see as the biggest challenge for open data as we move towards an AI future. And I think actually a lot of the questions we're getting asked in the chat are actually, very specific kind of examples of that. And so I'm gonna share a couple of the questions that we've had with you all, and all feel free to kind of jump in if you have a particular thought. So there's been quite a few questions that build on, I don't know what you're talking about just then in terms of data work and the opportunity that new AI models enable in terms of, for example, does it matter now whether data is published in consistent formats according to open schemas, or can we look to AI to structure it for us after? The open data community is often advised against publishing PDFs. Has that now changed in the era of LLMs? And then on the flip side, so some of the people in the chat are maybe a little bit uncomfortable if AI structures data on our behalf. So how is AI changing our relationship with data? Anyone want to jump in on that? Eleanor looks like she has a lot of ideas.
I'll keep it brief, but
Okay.
I absolutely understand why some people feel that the way data is structured needs to be curated by people, by expertise, and there's a lot of value in that. There will be use cases where having a curated structure, curated way to organize data will be very, very useful. And that's specifically when accurate answers are needed. Because as much as you want to have accurate answers that remain the same, that are robust to small changes in how you ask the queries, and many other things that we know and love in, let's just say, more traditional information retrieval. So for those cases, you would want to still continue to invest not just in PDFs. So at the same time, there's value in creating at least a draft of that structure automatically by looking into the PDFs and lifting, say, a schema or an ontology. But that needs to be curated. So that human in the loop aspect is absolutely essential to make sure that, say, a retrieval augmented generation architecture or something like that really delivers on that accuracy and trustworthiness promise.
Brilliant. Gretchen or Andrew, did you want to come in on that one?
I can come in a little bit on the publishing formats, which we have looked at a lot within Stream. And I think if you want to maximize the different ways that data can be used, I would say trying to make it as machine readable as possible has definitely been ticking a lot more boxes than something like a PDF. Large language models means you don't get no value from a PDF, but if you want to make it as available for as many different ways as possible, That example I gave earlier about the horrific Excel spreadsheet, we could create that as a PDF document. And I guess a large language model could probably find a sort of key value pair for an answer and a question within that. But the number of ways that you may want to use that data set, and you may want to use data sets across different companies from different publishers, having that as a machine readable format means that whether you're using AI as an answer engine, whether you're using AI to help you write some code or write a query against a data set, or whether you're just doing traditional data science across that data, any of those routes, or you just want to have a look at it in a tabular format and find it quickly. All of those routes are much simpler if you've designed that data to be in a machine readable format. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think you don't want to lock yourself into the only way you can use this data is with a large language model based AI tool to scrape the information you want, because you will always get inconsistencies with that. As good as they're getting nowadays, you're not going to get that definitive, this is the right role, this is the right value that I need, which you hopefully can get from the machine readable data to say this value in this table is exactly the same as the one in this table.
So the future of AI doing all our dirty work for us is not quite here, but we'll keep hoping. Gretchen, if you did want to come in on that, feel free. But I also had another one here for you, which I think you might have a few thoughts on. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the only thing I was going to add is that there are ways to think about prioritizing where to focus the especially for large language models, for example, they really rely on data that's authoritative, that's unique, that's knowledge dense. So there's certain attributes where you can think about when it comes to, applying metadata or really focusing on the curation of it to think about prioritization. So that's just another aspect.
Excellent. And so something else that's come up in the chat that I think is something those in the open data community, as Eleanor alluded to, have been talking about for some time is the fact that we all know, we're all in agreement about how important open data has been and is. But it seems like lots of other people don't necessarily always understand the importance of good quality open data and the impact that can have on AI, but also in lots of other use cases. How do we spread the message about open data? How do we get people to understand the impact that open data has had and is having, and can kind of change the narrative around open data? Who fancies it? Gretchen?
I would just say I think it is really this bringing the impact to life, through practical examples, real use cases, and highlighting that connection. I think often we just don't make that strong enough connection. We talk about the need and the importance, and then maybe the end result, but bringing that together in a way that really can, people can really just easily grasp. And I think just doing that through those practical examples is really, really key. And so much of you know scientific discovery today will come through with a lot of what's made available through open data, and highlighting those connection points, I just think is so critical to really make that connection for people.
Well,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna name one statistic, which is from ML Commons. ML Commons is a members-based association, a nonprofit that develops benchmarking infrastructure and standards for different AI use cases. So they have done some research and that showed that 75% of advances in AI and machine learning in particular were based on open data sets. And that doesn't refer to the last 3 years. That refers to decades and decades and decades of advances that have brought us to this point. So it's 75%. And that includes also corporate work. in AI and machine learning that has been open sourced. I think the other thing I would say is that there is also very good comprehensive research that shows that openness and various degrees of openness in models, but also in different data resources, does lead to more use. So back in the day, I think there was also a question earlier about FAIR and the role of FAIR, and FAIR remains very important, but FAIR comes from a time, so from a different community, let's say machine learning research or engineering. So building those bridges would be important. But I used to do some work where I started with the FAIR principles and I found 50 to 100 papers that were trying to provide advice and guidance for the data publisher to make their data more fair. And at the same time, I've tried to tie those principles to actual evidence that leads to more downloads and that leads to more engagements and that leads to contribution. That evidence is there. And there's research was done by other colleagues that has shown that it's exactly the same for machine learning data sets and for machine learning models as well. So doing that leads to more adoption. At the same time, I still think lots of the things that we have been saying in the last 15 years about open data infrastructure still need to be repeated today because the stakes are even higher. The fact that the open data is like roads, and you don't just build a road and expect it to just last forever, it still needs to be said. We still need to maintain this. The stakes are very, very high. There's huge opportunities in making this data available now for AI, but also for other types of use cases. But that investment is still needed. That message needs to continue to be said and put on T-shirts and put on stickers and discussed with not just with government but with other sources of funding as well. And I say one last thing. I think I'd also love to see some sort of counterfactual analysis. What would have happened? I mean, it's quite hard to do this with machine learning and other techniques to do that because of just how generative AI works. But is there a way, and what sort of methods do we have to actually imagine a world where there hasn't been any Wikipedia and there hasn't been any open data resources like Common Crawl and others? What types of AI performance would we have had, and who would have had access to it, and what types of investments and would it have required? And I'm not talking about compute necessarily. I'm talking about the actual access to the data, but also access to the expertise of all those people who have contributed to those resources.
And maybe
Brilliant.
just briefly building on that, I think one area that we can see that come through is an area that I mentioned at the outset on language data. If you look at the internet, about half of that is in English. And so it's simply not going to perform as well if a large language model is trained on that. So that's, one element that can come through to showcase what that looks like in practice and the need for more digitized content in other languages, especially low resource languages.
Brilliant. So I think we've got time for one more question. We're going to keep it, give you all one answer each, 1 minute to answer each. But if you look forward kind of in 5 years' time, how would you expect the landscape of open data to look? Do we think it's going to be growing and booming and even more open data than we see today? Or maybe these trends continuing around people restricting access and not being able to afford to continue to publish data? So 1 minute each. We start with Andrew.
I'm naturally an optimist. I think if we can get it right and we can keep telling the success stories around the data sets that we're publishing, and we can keep using AI in the right way to lower that barrier for entry for people to access data, to get value from data, I think the potential there is huge for more people to be doing really smart things with data, and that could be data that we're publishing with the intention. I hope someone, we've done some stuff that people have used to build models of river health, and that's great. That was we'd hope they would do that. They did it, brilliant. Other stuff we published and people have used it for completely sort of left field things that we hadn't anticipated. But still, if we can tell those stories of the benefits people are getting from data, and we can encourage more people to get hands-on with data now, that barrier for entry is lower with these AI tools. I think potentially it could be a real plus in the next few years.
Brilliant. Gretchen, in 5 years' time, will you be on another webinar talking about the world of open data, or will it be no more?
I hope so. I do hope that we also are seeing more of these. I do think we'll just be seeing more of these data commons. As I talked about earlier, I think there's just a tremendous opportunity there, and based on just so small sample size, but the data challenge that we did and the number of organizations that are really exploring this, it was just super inspiring. And I think the more that we can enable this community engagement and really community stewardship and support, then that will should flourish. And so yeah, I'm excited about that, and I do hope we can reconvene and see where we are in 5 years.
Brilliant. And Eleanor, final word. Where are we going to be in
Yeah,
5 years'
but
time?
just to say first that it's great to see initiatives like the one by GovLab and Microsoft, because one thing that we need to get right as a general principle is that principle of giving back to that ecosystem. And this for me is an excellent example of giving back. Now I am also quite positive. I mean, there's lots of interesting noises around the world. If you look at what the US is doing and what China are doing about open source and how they see this as a national strategy, the whole conversations around sovereign tech in Europe, also in the UK, and the understanding that part of that strategy is the ability of a country, of a nation, to provide resources that are going to be used in various parts of the world for innovation. So that's quite good. The fact that the AI for strategy, the AI for science paper that DCAI has recently published starts with data. That's also very good. So this I think we're going to see a lot in this space in the next years, which will hopefully also result in some investment for those types of data commons projects, because there's many initiatives like that deserve to be supported.
Absolutely. Well, glad to end on a positive note. That was a really fantastic panel discussion. Thank you to Gretchen, Andrew, and Eleanor. And also thank you very much to the audience for having so much engagement in the chat and for such fantastic questions. Yeah, hope to see you all again in 5 years' time then. Seems like we're going to be talking about how important open data is for a long time. So thank you once again, and see you again soon.